A very good evening to you. It's 8 o'clock. I'm Gareth Edwards. This is eNews, live from Johannesburg, South Africa. These are your top stories.
We have the money, so money is going to be mobilized to assist our people.
Over 60 people have lost their lives in KwaZulu-Natal as the president now promises to set additional funds aside to help the destitute. Where to next for AMCU? The Labour Registrar has issued a notice of intent to cancel the union's registration. And despite allegations of corruption and embezzlement, the Arts and Culture Ministry finally gets the Winnie Mandela Museum off the ground in Brandford in the Free State. Plenty more news and sport on the show a little bit later for you. First, our top story. KwaZulu-Natal is in mourning tonight with the entire nation. It's believed at least 60 people have lost their lives this after floods destroyed homes and ripped through roads. The president has approved emergency funds to help those affected, but it's unclear at this time when that money will actually come through. For now, people are trying their best to pick up their lives. Mawenda Keswa reports.
A road collapsed, swallowing everything around it. And this house is now on the brink of collapse.
It was devastating. I nearly lost my life in that. My neighbor, I believe, is in hospital, recovering at the moment. So it was very traumatizing.
Residents say they're afraid of spending the night in their own homes.
One of our big concerns is obviously the neighbour's swimming pool, which is large and is right near my boundary wall. And if that pool goes and the volume of water coming towards my house would obviously cause another disaster.
In Chatsworth, this community has been cut off. A main road has washed away and they've been left without water and help since Monday.
We've been left with no water, no sanitation, no telephone lines, nothing. Municipality has not helped us at all. Disaster management was supposed to have come. Nobody has assisted us at all.
The rain left a trail of destruction across KwaZulu-Natal. This informal settlement wasn't spared. Many homes crumbled, others hanging by a thread.
This was so hard. Got so many houses and so many people don't have a house to stay. And then even now, the people don't know where you're going to stay and then where you're going to eat.
As residents try to pick up the pieces themselves, government is promising to assist.
We have the money, so money is going to be mobilized to assist our people.
But it remains unclear when and how those resources will be filtered down to those affected. Mawenda Keswa, Durban.
Well, that is just part of the devastation that the country has been facing today down on the eastern seaboard. Let's bring you the very latest. Take you live now to my colleague Desan Tathia, who's been tracking the worst affected areas. Desan, hello to you. Emergency services. It's been a long few days and those rescue efforts are not over as yet. What's the latest?
That's right, Gareth. It's been non-stop for rescuers who've been on the ground, really moving from one area to the next, depending on reports that they've been getting from the community and those that are in these areas to get that message out. So what you're seeing behind me is the last of the team that's here in Dassenhoek, and that's where I am at the moment. They've been working here now for the second day, in fact, trying to recover the body of a woman who seems to be under a vehicle covered by mud, and that's a few hundred meters away from us on the right-hand side. And they have been working tirelessly trying to get through really thick mud, and they haven't been able to pull that off just yet today, but they will be returning tomorrow. The good news is that there were others who were also washed away in this community but managed to survive. I spoke to two sisters earlier on, along with their children, who were taken when the water hit this area. Now, just to describe it to you, where I'm standing at the moment is on the roadside, and the area that I'm talking about is actually below road level. And as you can imagine, when those rains hit this area, they were really susceptible to all of the damage that it could cause.
Desan, just give me a sense then, that's what's happened so far today. We know the weather in that part of the country, according to our weather department, is still going to be very rainy for at least the next 24 hours, expecting more rain. What are emergency services? A, what are they saying? And B, how are communities preparing themselves?
That's just it, Gareth. They've really been caught on the back foot. I mean, this is both the emergency services as well as communities. The emergency services have had their teams on the ground really working non-stop, many of them pulling extra shifts. Government has told us that resources are quite stretched. They've had to call in extra help from neighbouring municipalities as well. For the communities, many of them who've lost their homes during the flood this week will now have to try to rebuild what they can. For example, as some of the informal settlements that we saw, they are trying to get roofs above their heads once again just before any other rain falls. And for those that have lost their homes completely, they are now being put up at temporary shelters. They are in places of worship and community halls, and the appeal for any type of donations to help these people is still very much out there. And that's for things like blankets and mattresses, because when they do settle in these community halls, there really isn't a place for them to sleep. There aren't any beds, so they need these types of supplies urgently, as well as food supplies, which have been coming in, but it's never really enough considering the number of people that have been displaced.
And there are thousands upon thousands. Des and Tathia, thank you very much. Live to us from Dassenhoek down in KwaZulu-Natal. You can follow Dassen on Twitter as well. Go and look for Des and Tathia for the very latest on how you might be able to assist, and also the latest on those rescue efforts. Let's stay with the news of the flooding in the country to the Eastern Cape next, though at least 4 people have died amid the flooding. The provincial government still assessing the extent of that damage. Zikona Chona is in Mount Freera, where she spoke to the family of a drowned 12-year-old girl.
Still numb from the pain of losing her daughter, "12-year-old Asive Buso drowned in this river while trying to cross the bridge to get to a village on the other side. Her mother was at work at the time. By the time Nomawethu Buso arrived at the scene, it was too late." She recounts Asive's last words spoken to her younger brother, who was with her when she died.
What help me? Engumile. Waphinda futhi wathi help me, waveza isandla uthi utsho engumile. Nangoke Asive ecela uncedo. Ethi ndincedeni bo bapha abantu, ndincedeni ndiyafa.
Buso says her daughter was a smart little girl who disliked people making fun of her dark skin.
Abantu baphikisana nendalo kaThixo, ufika kuthiwa ndingumthukuru. Ndiyawucinga zonke ezo athi mama ndimhle ngoba ndidende nalo nelizinyo.
What is most painful for the family is how the little girl died, right here, while her 9-year-old brother begged her to stay afloat, not knowing it would be the last time he would see his best friend. Zikona Chona, Mount Freera in the Eastern Cape.
Well, the Association of Mine Workers and Construction Union, or AMCU, could be shut down. Earlier today, the Labour Registrar issued a notice of intent to cancel the union's registration. The Labour Registrar highlighted AMCU no longer functions in terms of its own constitution and is, and I quote, not a genuine trade union as envisaged in the Act. Last week, to remind you, AMCU finally signed a wage agreement with Sibanye-Stillwater, which was the same signed by 3 other unions in November last year, rendering its 5-month strike fruitless. That strike action resulted in violence and considerable damage to property. The Labour Registrar says AMCU will now have to make written representations as to why its registration should not be cancelled. AMCU says it won't be commenting on the matter at this stage. Labour expert Andrew Levy tells us this may lead to members losing their pensions.
If the basis of the deregistration arises out of financial mismanagement and in point of fact actions that would be tantamount to fraud, then of course the members would have an action against the leadership who committed that fraud, as well as it being a possible criminal offence. But, you know, I must stress that we have no information as to what the issue might be. I do know that there has been an issue in a number of unions, and I suspect this may be the case with AMCU as well, that they are seeking to have the members' contributions and their accredited surpluses in their pension provident funds transferred to a union-controlled scheme.
To news from Brandfort in the Free State next, where it seems the Winnie Mandela House will finally become a reality. The project will turn the late struggle icon's home, where she was banished to in the late 1970s, into a museum. But it's been dogged by delays and multiple allegations of corruption. My colleague Michael Apple has the story.
Public pronouncements that Winnie Mandela's home in Brandfort would be turned into a museum date as far back as 2005. Now, Arts and Culture Minister Nathi Mthethwa says that despite all the hurdles along the way, construction is set to begin soon.
The nitty-gritties of the technical hold-ups have been felt in the process, both at the level of the appointment, especially of the service provider, which has been appointed and which is going to commence with its work.
Asked why a project that has been years in the making is being unveiled 2 weeks before an election, the minister had this to say.
We said last year we are going to do well. At that time we didn't even know when the elections was going to be. And it doesn't matter, even if elections were tomorrow, if our processes was taking us to the 7th of May, we were going to do what we are doing today. So we're not perturbed about people who say politicking.
A community member who regards herself as the best friend in Brandfort to the late struggle icon says they're overjoyed.
I think even our children and our great-grandchildren will be happy.
In about 7 months from now, there's likely to be much fanfare about the newly unveiled museum. But questions remain about why it took so long and just whose fingers were in the cookie jar. Michael Apple in Brandfort in the Free State.
And we come back here on eNews this evening. More details are now emerging around the bombings of 3 churches and 4 hotels in Sri Lanka on Easter Sunday. Well, let's take a look at what's happening in the world of the markets today. And joining me is Freeway Matseda with what is actually happening with the markets as we head into late Wednesday evening.
Well, Gareth, the rand today was heading for its 5th consecutive session of losses, and this is on the back of weaker consumer confidence data that we saw coming out this afternoon.
Welcome back. We're joining us now with the world of news this evening, and Competition Commission coming down on everything we use, mobile networks.
Absolutely. So they've released a draft report today to say that our mobile network operators are charging data prices that are just too high. So South Africa's got the highest amongst the BRICS countries as well as SADC. If you look at the poorer, they say that the data is anti-poor. So if you look at the poorer people, if you're buying a poorer consumer buying 100 megs of data, they're paying about 25% more than someone like you or I who would buy a gig of data at a time. So they've set out a whole list of recommendations, and one of them is to relax some of those high fees, as well as reducing their operating tariffs to bring down those costs. Another thing, though, that they've acknowledged is the fact that government and these network operators are not working together to release that spectrum, which is another constraint to the data prices that we're seeing at the moment.
So fighting for the small guy at this point is the Competition Commission. Let's quickly take a look at markets this evening. Take us through that.
Absolutely. So it was a red day across the board today. The JSE closed lower, with only platinum and gold miners showing a few signs of life, and this amid caution on some global markets. So we saw the banks losing about 2%, while financials lost 1.4%, and food and drug retailers losing 2.5% on the day. If we take a look at your commodities, gold was 0.28% higher today after a disappointing last trading session, and this as investors gun for more riskier assets. Meanwhile, Brent crude was flat, but it is still at those record highs. If we take a look at the local unit now, the rand looked set for its 5th consecutive session of losses against the US dollar, and some of the pressure came after data showed that business confidence in the country fell 2 index points from 7 in the 4th quarter of 2018, Gareth.
All right, Fiwe, thank you very much. Indeed, that's what's happening in the world of business this evening. Also, your markets news, sports news with Jeffrey Stevens coming up in a while. First, though, international news now, and more details emerging around the bombings on 3 churches and 4 hotels in Sri Lanka on Easter Sunday. A local TV station has broadcast surveillance footage allegedly showing 2 suspected suicide bombers walking into a hotel shortly before the bombs were detonated. Officials have now arrested 60 people in connection with the attacks, which have so far claimed the lives of 359 people. The Islamic State militant group has claimed responsibility. To the break, we spoke about the weather earlier. There's Candice McKechnie getting ready, as you can see, for our live weather forecast. We're going to be focusing, of course, on the eastern seaboard of the country. That's plenty more when we come back. Also, it seems cake smash parties, Jeffrey. What's a cake smash party? Not just for human babies? No idea what it is. We'll tell you when we come back. All right, let's see what's happening in the world of weather. Candice McKechnie, we're watching the eastern seaboard, no doubt, very carefully tonight.
Good evening, Gareth. Well, you're absolutely correct. That's where we've seen really wet weather over the last couple of days. And the bad news is that we're still expecting rain on Thursday, but the good news is that it is going to ease off, especially in the second part of the week. Here's our rain forecast, still showing a few isolated thundershowers over the northeastern and eastern parts on Thursday. We're also still expecting a bit of rain along the eastern Cape coastline, with up to a 60% chance of thunderstorms over northeastern KZN. Fine and dry over the western and central parts, but with some fog starting to move in along the western and southwestern coastline, and even along the south coast by Thursday evening. A fine and dry day is expected throughout the northern Cape. A warm afternoon, a minimum temperature of around 8 over the eastern parts. You'll see a warm day throughout the western Cape, a bit of cloud over the southern parts. 30 degrees for Worcester and Robertson, Cape Town and Longabard both in the mid-20s. A warmer day for the eastern Cape, and of course a much drier here. A bit of rain still along the coastline, with thundershowers over the far eastern parts. Thundershowers also remain for KwaZulu-Natal, especially over the northeastern parts, but with that break in the cloud, a warmer day. We head into the low 20s for much of Mpumalanga, hot over the eastern parts with isolated thundershowers, partly cloudy and warm as we head towards Limpopo. 28 for Tabazimbi and Polokwane. You'll also see a warm afternoon for northwest, dry over the western part of the province, and thundershowers are expected for Bethlehem and Harrismith at 21, partly cloudy for Bloemfontein at 7 and 24 degrees. In Gauteng, we're expecting isolated thundershowers, 23 degrees for Soweto and Johannesburg, with Pretoria and Vereeniging seeing highs in the mid-20s. On Friday, a few drops of rain remain for Richards Bay, but you'll see much drier and warmer conditions across the country, mild over the southern parts, but by Saturday, we're expecting sunny and warm weather for most weather stations. That's all from the Weather Centre. Good night.
All right, Candice McKechnie, thanks very much for what's happening in the weather over the next 48 hours or so. Now, finally, the cake smash. Would you believe it has become a popular tradition for celebrating a baby's first birthday, but it seems the tradition is no longer limited to human beings. Why would it be? 4 meerkats who celebrated their birthday recently at Australia's Symbio Wildlife Park were treated to a cake smash party. It just took a few minutes for Finn, Bindi, Kiana and Amahle to rip their cake to pieces before their little friends were able to join in on the fun. The 2-tier cake was made from watermelon, zucchini, baby carrots and broccoli, so healthy as well. The furry quadruplets were also treated to new toys to play with. Sure. All right, let's take a look at your headline stories before we say goodbye for this evening.
We have the money, so money is going to be mobilized to assist our people.
Over 60 people have lost their lives in KwaZulu-Natal as the president promises to set additional funds aside to help the destitute. This evening, questions being asked, where to next for AMCU? The Labour Registrar has issued a notice of intent to cancel the union's registration. As always, my thanks to the team for putting the show together. From myself, Gareth Edwards. Until next time, good night.